me a few hours, and I finished the whole thing. I probably would be the first one here who has finished the book. And you know, one thought came to my mind. I was reminded of what that famous English poet Shelley said in his, as way back as in 1821 in his defense of poetry, that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. So here is a poet who has thought about the whole world's problems and has placed it before all of us. This was my initial reaction. And Dr. Jha, of course, in his succinct words, he has laid down the philosophy, the law, and poets being legislators of the world, as I said. And a few days back when I met him, I shouted from his below the balcony of his house. I said, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And of course, being a student of literature, he was very happy. But let me go back to the initial reaction. Dr. Jha's father was a freedom fighter who had struggled for India's freedom. He comes from that background and from the ancient Mithila region. So when I read the first poem, I went back in time. And I went back into ancient India, to the Gurukuls, to the forests, students collecting firewood to make their midday meal, and while collecting, discussing Panini's drama, then I could see in my mind's eye professors, the gurus, talking to them and discussing the aphorisms of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So from that world, Dr. Jha's poetry has come to today, to the Supreme Court, to India in the 21st century. So that is the initial world, and the world, there was only one aim in life for those philosophers and the gurus, and that is the search for truth. We may be journalists, we may be lawyers, we may be teachers, but the end was to find truth through these mediums. So truth was the concern of man, and that is the basis and the core of Indian civilization. Dr. Jha's poetry immediately focuses on this aspect on the first book. The second aspect which I would like to mention is the political aspect. And politics for him, from what I gather in his poetry, is the ideal kind of politics. But before I go into politics, I noted down one stanza which from his book, which talks about this ideal world of ancient India, and I would like to read that out. A new race is born of the strength of man, nourishing art, science, love, liberty and law, promising maintenance of stable order and harmony, immortal in noble deeds, carrying life forward. So with that perspective, in the first half of the book is the idealistic type, not the politics we see today. Not that there aren't honest politicians, there are many, but we won't hear about them. We'll hear about the other type. And his definition, I was reminded of what someone said. What's the difference between a politician and a statesman? The politician looks towards the next election, while the statesman looks towards the next generation. This is what the philosophy and the thinking that Dr. Jha puts in his poetry. And one stanza I've collected from that section, and that is his poem, End of Ideology. He says, and I quote, looting the state and public funds, jeopardizing the freedom struggle of the people, making hay in the transition of humanity. So this is our politics, and of course, no use criticizing politics and politicians and other people. We are all part of it. If you are not part of the solution, we are definitely part of the problem. That is how I look at it. In our each individual way, whatever we could do, we should do. That's how I look at it, in a very positive manner, instead of just criticizing politicians. Then I come to the third aspect, and I will have finished, and that is the judicial aspect. Now, Dr. Jha's last portion of his poem deals with what the basic structure theory in his the judicial aspect of his poems. And as one knows, and as most distinguished lawyers are all here, they know that in case Vananda Bharati, the Supreme Court laid down the basic structure theory, and judicial review is itself part of the basic structure, and the court in its wisdom tries to review each action of the state. So here, when we talk about judicial review and for the rights of man, for the poor people, I somehow feel, in spite of our idealism, we are failing somewhere. Our judicial system, with great respect to all the learned lawyers here, I think we have failed in two respects. One is, for the poor man, the fundamental rights. I think this next time when he writes his poetry, of course it all comes from the heart. Poetry is, as someone said, a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions. So next time we should think about it and his emotion should come out. That first thing we have failed is it's meant for the rich and the poor are too far away from it. And number two is the delays of our laws. And this has created serious problems in this country. 150 districts out of our 400 odd districts are in the grip of Naxal violence. They have given up our system, our law, our democratic system, and they found alternative remedies for their sorrows and for their poverty. So that is one aspect all of us should think about and cogitate. And if we can't be poets like Dr. Jha, definitely we can think and we can write and do our little part. Thank you very much.